So your father never forced you to become a chartered accountant?
He did. He does still. It's more, I think it's inspired from Harvard, because Harvard actually set IIM Ahmedabad up in India.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know this. Harvard set up IIM Ahmedabad in India?
Yeah. So
although you are evaluating businesses.
That is true. I think. Yeah.
Are you evaluating your dad's business?
I do.
Hi everyone, welcome to the series Conversation with Kushal once again. Today we have with us one very young, smart chap who's a senior associate at Carlyle, and his journey is going to be extremely inspiring for all of us. Right from IIT Kanpur to IIM Ahmedabad to working at McKinsey and now working at Carlyle. Let me welcome Samyak Daga. Thanks a lot, Samyak, for accepting my invitation. It's a very, very good sense of honor for me to have you here.
No, thank you so much. It's great what you do with your channel and with all the students and working professionals that you do, and I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy to help in any way I can.
Definitely, means a lot, and I think it's all because of people like you, like who are able to contribute and guide back to the fraternity. And I think I'm just a medium through which like a lot of knowledge is given to the students community.
Yeah. Oh, thanks for having me.
Perfect. So Samyak, let's start from your earlier journey itself. Let's start from your childhood, and then we'll discuss about your professional career. So how was your entire childhood like? How were you as a person? And let's then take it ahead.
Got it. So I'm from Jaipur. I was born and brought up in Jaipur. I did all my schooling there, and so my father is a chartered accountant. And you know how fathers are when they're chartered accountants. They start. And he was also he started up himself. He's built a business of his own. So one of the first experiences that I had as a child was when I used to be with him at his office. He used to generate so much employment, and that actually affected me a lot while growing up. And the second I would say is my mom, who was a housewife, but after we had sort of made something of ourselves, she picked up a new stream and she brought laurels to herself, in jewelry designing, gold medals and stuff. My father was also a chartered accountant, rank 1 in his time. So both of those, I think, my parents basically molded me to be a little bit more serious towards academics, towards growing up, and becoming sort of a little bit more academic oriented, let's say, developing across sort of streams of. So I actually, while I was doing science, maths, my father also taught me chartered, accounting, basic accounting, economics, finance, and stuff. So a lot of that helped me who I am today, helped me with who I am today, and I actually am really thankful to those experiences. And so while I was as a child, the only thing that I was focused on is getting things right while studying, preparing well for my school exams and school competitions. But one thing I did also, sort of, again, my mom and my father who pushed me. I was also and both my brother and I both, we were always guided towards not just studies, but also music. For example, I'm a Sangeet Visharad in music.
Oh wow!
We won a lot of art competitions, both my brother and I, and so it was a pretty holistic sort of childhood for me. It does help a lot when you're multidimensional, especially when towards today, for example, when I meet with people, I can talk about not just my subject matter or my streams or my sectors, but also some of the other things that I grew up as a child. So I think overall, I would say what helped me during childhood was, one, quite a lot of focus by my parents towards academics first, at the same time guiding me towards being a well-rounded sort of a person, and the initial exposure that I had in business, in finance, in economics, which helps me even today.
So your father never forced you to become a chartered accountant?
He did. He does still. I did appear for CPT, and I got a rank in that.
Oh wow!
But after that, I think when I went into the second level IPCC, that was, I think, too much of writing for me. Till then, I was already at IIT, so I studied for it, but it was just too much of writing that I had to do. And massive respect for all you CAs out there, because it is. And my wife is a CA now.
Oh, okay.
My father is a CA, like I said. So it's a I have massive respect for all CAs out there and all who prepare for CAs, because it's just a difficult difficult stream to get through.
Right.
And your book, I'm sure, helps a lot of people there.
Oh, I'm glad that you know about the book as well. I didn't know that you knew about the book as well. But I think talking about the CPT rank, well, that intrigues me now. So, which rank you had in your CPT?
I had rank 9 actually.
Oh, wow. And then you did not give your IPCC.
Yeah,
I mean,
so
a rank 9 CPT guy did not give IPCC and went into IIT.
Yeah.
So, how was that transition, commerce to science?
I actually gave my CPT during IIT.
Okay.
So I was already at IIT Kanpur.
Okay.
And then, like I said, I had learned some basic accounting, economics, finance along the way while I was growing up via my father. And therefore it was difficult, but it was also like just a 2-3 months of dedicated preparation after sort of the basics that I already had picked during that time.
So how was the time frame? Like which year, which month was IPCC? Then when did you give IIT? And how did you manage these academics?
2011 April was, I remember, because 2nd April India won the World Cup. And 7 days after that I had my IIT exam, 9th April. And then I think I appeared for CPT in December of that year.
Okay, December 2011.
December 2011.
Oh, achha, after your IIT exams.
After my IIT exams. And actually I joined IIT in July.
Okay.
And then, so in winters there is a month of gap when, I was just a first year, right? So nobody would hire me as an intern or anything. So I thought, might as well prepare for a couple of months for CPT and give it, because my father, like you said, always forced me to become a CA, which I never did afterwards. But then it got too much. I think the regular coursework at IIT, along with preparation for IPCC, just became too much.
Right. On a lighter note, do you plan to resume your IPCC?
No. not anymore.
Right.
I did appear for CFA after that. I've cleared CFA now, but
Got it.
But I don't think CA is at least now on my radar.
Yeah, got it. Makes sense. Let's talk about your IIT journey. Then you got into IIT Kanpur,
Yes.
like I checked on your LinkedIn as well.
Yes.
So how was that entire experience at IIT Kanpur, and how did that 4 years, right?
Years.
How did those 4 years change your entire personality? How were you before, and how were you as a person after those 4 years?
Got it. I think IIT is the first time when you realize that when you're being brought up in school, you're always like the top 1-2 and so on. You do well in exams, etc. I think IIT is the first place you realize that there are a lot of smart people that are with you day in, day out, and therefore it just transforms you as a person. It makes you more humble. And inspired at the same time, because there are a lot of people who are very good at what they do. So my my sidey, which is basically the one who stayed in my adjacent room, he was a superb guitarist, and while clearing IIT. So it just opens you up in more ways than one. I had chosen specifically a stream of computer science and engineering because 2007, 8, 9, 10, when I was growing up, that time all of these Google, internet, e-commerce, everything was coming up so well, right? And it was just starting to the computers basically was starting to change the way people operate and so on. And I thought that's one stream that I should at least gain an exposure to, and therefore with my rank I could have gotten IIT Bombay, some mechanical kind of and IIT Bombay is preferred by people because of its campus and Bombay, etc. But I chose Kanpur computer science because of first computer science as the branch. I think from what I hear lately nowadays in recent years, I think that trend is changing. People do prefer computer science. People do prefer branches over IITs. But during my time when I had been there, I think people used to just prefer IITs over their branches. I want to get into IIT Bombay, whichever branch I get. But that's, I think, changing, which is I think the right way. You have to, I think, look at what you want to study more than where you want to study.
Right. What exactly are you taught in computer science? How does that change your personality? Because I'm sure like computer science is a very niche where only a few set of students are able to get into that branch, is what I have heard with my limited knowledge in the field of finance. But what I've heard is that like computer science is the best branch to get into, and like through that branch itself you are molded completely in terms of thinking analytically, or like having those kind of skill sets.
Yes.
So what exactly is taught to you, and how does that change your mindset, or what kind of skills do you develop after getting into that branch?
Got it. No, that's a good question. I think The way I think about it is computer science can be divided into three parts. One is a very theoretical, mathematical, base that it has. So every computer is just, at the end of the day, it's zero ones, and how they interact with each other, the binary code. So I think that is one aspect of what you do. The way that helps the way that helped me later in finance is at IIM Ahmedabad I did a little bit, and I'm jumping here, but at IIM Ahmedabad I did a lot of advanced finance courses where you had to, like for example, I derived Black-Scholes formula, right, from the very basic, for example, right. So it's a theoretical part of it, but it just helps you build that mathematical background. The second I would say is very practical algorithms and data structures kind of thing. The way so for example, the things that you solve is how you optimize, for example, doing a certain task, right? And that even helps me today, for example, and it helps me more in interactions with portfolio companies rather than my day-to-day work. But when we interact with the companies, there an optimization problem, something like that. So then, it does help, for example, think about it. When people say that this is what we're trying to do, then it helps me at least visualize that a bit. So theory, algorithms, and the last part is I think the hardware and how let's say a computer gets constructed, etc. That's a small part of the course, at least at IIT Kanpur back then it was. But yeah, that also I think that has, although that has changed massively over the last 10-15 years, but still it's a great sort of to think about in day-to-day lives, right? If you think about what kind of machine you want to buy, and the hardware that goes into it, how do you optimize that and things like that. I think that's I think the last stream is where that's probably the most unused part of my education back at IIT Kanpur. And then at IIT Kanpur I also had, I think that's one way IIT Kanpur in particular, and I think now other IITs have also started, is they have some other courses which are in the humanities sort of background. So just to give you a sort of more well-rounded education. There I actually had economics. So I did a lot of game theory. I did a lot of macroeconomics and so on, which was very helpful. I think eventually it helped me open sort of my own perspective into what happens, how the world works, and how companies work, how countries work, etc. And that actually was very helpful for me at IIT Kanpur. So computer science and economics that I would say the highlights of my academic career back at IIT Kanpur. I also had the chance to, like I said, interact with a lot of smart people, a lot of people who are good at what they do in academics, but also in other work streams, in other sort of areas, like I said. I also was there a part of the music club and so on. So that was also a very good. College life is always great. So you make great friends, you have great experiences, and that develops you in the kind of person that you are.
Is it true that a lot of people state that IITians are preferred over, let's say, different fields or maybe different kind of students in private equity or venture capital or those sort, at least as far as the statistics are concerned? So what's your view on that? And if yes, why is that happening, or how is that going to change in the future?
Got it. No, I think in private equity, at least so I would say that not a lot of CAs actually even attempt to go to, let's say, McKinsey, BCG, Bain kind of a work stream from where you transition to a private equity, typically. Although those, industries are not comparable at all, which I'll come to. But, so that's one reason I think, because IITs definitely have a lot more, they have campus placements, for example, where some of these companies come in. So it's easier for them to, go in there, join, and then, transition into these industries. I think the second thing I would say is what people look for if you're hiring directly out of a person with, for example, no job experience, very little job experience. I think what they want to look for is people who can learn, right? And at least the way which I don't completely believe in, the way people think about it is, and when I interview, for example, I think one of the things that I look for when judging the person on smarts, the basic smarts and the first principles, and the intuition kind of intelligence. I think IIT is sort of a great stamp that people usually get biased by, like that if he's an IITian, especially in the 1,000, 2,000, 3,000 kind of ranks, then he has the smarts to be able to learn something very quickly. So I think that is one bias that I think is incorrect. I think I've had at Carlyle itself, I've had so many people who are CAs I'm working with, who I've worked with in the past, who are actually very, very smart. So that, so when I interview, I make it a point that I don't have that bias. But still, I think it is more to do with the way you enter. So for example, for CAs, the number of CAs that get into MBB is smaller than McKinsey, BCG pay, and then to private equity is even smaller, and so on and so forth. So that's just, I think that's just a thing that has just happened. I think it's going to change. At Carlyle, for example, I currently work with a few CAs who are very smart and who actually CAs have an added advantage for sure, because day one they know P&L, balance sheet, cash flow, which an engineer has to learn from scratch. So I do think they have an advantage after joining. But before joining, I think the kind of, let's say, critical thinking or IQ kind of questions or puzzle solving that happens more at IIT than CAs. At least that's what I feel. Which is how people judge smartness these days, and that's how that whole industry has evolved so far.
Makes sense.
But I think that's going to change.
No, makes sense. I think I completely agree, because like a lot of my CA friends also, whom I talk to on a regular basis, have been involved in these kind of an industries like PVC, consulting and all. The number is increasing year after year.
Yes.
It's primarily like because of the skill set also, which people are now focusing on while recruiting. And apart from that, as you mentioned, I think CA has an advantage of, let's say, understanding the P&L, balance sheet, the corporate finance part, which you get taught in CFA. And I think that would have been one of the reasons you would have done a CFA in order to understand the basics of accounting, basics of finance.
Correct.
So let's take a step back again. Let's go to your IIM journey now. You spoke about the IIT Kanpur experience. Firstly, why did you want to do an MBA? And secondly, how was your entire experience at IIM Ahmedabad? How did that change your life again?
Got it. So at IIT Kanpur, I had, like I said, computer science. I did a couple of internships in that area. What I realized is that for a long term, I don't want to sort of just do programming. And therefore, and like I said, the experiences I had during my childhood around businesses, economics, finance, those also, I think I wanted to work somewhere closer to that. The easiest way, I mean, there were a couple of ways to do it. One is get a kind of a banking job like a JP Morgan or a Deutsche Bank kind of a job after IIT Kanpur, which people do, and then try to do a MBA and so on. But at the same time, I also appeared for CAT. And when this opportunity came along for IIM Ahmedabad, I thought that instead of working and then studying, which is always difficult because studying requires a different kind of mindset, I think that is when I made the call that let me just complete my studies first and then work as a professional. So that's the main reason of going into IIM Ahmedabad directly. I even had the option of deferred admission to IIM Ahmedabad, but like I said, I just wanted to complete the studies right at one go and then move into sort of job. I did have a few jobs in the US programming and stuff, but I wanted to do a little bit more closer to business, decision making, economics, finance, and so on. So that's when I moved into IIM Ahmedabad. At IIM, I would say again it was people with very, very diverse backgrounds. So engineers, but apart from that, a lot of CAs, a lot of lawyers, even experienced, non-experienced, freshers. So very, very diverse perspectives that you get at IIM Ahmedabad.
If you can give a rough estimate of the number of students and what proportion would be of
I think
each.
our batch had 400 people. I think 50% were engineers.
Okay.
And now that number is actually now mandated to be slightly lower. So IIM Ahmedabad, after I joined, actually changed its criteria to not just be a CAT percentile plus interviews, but they also give some preferential benefit. I don't know how exactly that works, but they give some benefit to people from different backgrounds, lawyers and arts and so on. So I think that number is now increasing for sure. But I think at that time the split was, from what I recall, 50-50.
This was back in which year?
I joined in 2015.
Got it. Yeah.
Now I think it's changing quite a bit towards that.
Got it. Yeah. Sorry. Continue.
So like I said, I think Ahmedabad, very diverse perspectives, because science, maths, engineers at IIT Kanpur to lawyers and interacting with CAs, lawyers, people with arts background and so on. And then the way of teaching is also very different at IIM Ahmedabad. It's more, I think it's inspired from Harvard, because Harvard actually set IIM Ahmedabad up in India.
Okay, sorry, I didn't know this. Harvard set up IIM Ahmedabad in India?
Yeah. So, I mean, it was a collaboration between Vikram Sarabhai, who started IIM Ahmedabad, and Harvard. So, a lot of the first professors actually came from there.
Oh, is it?
And they set up the pedagogy, the entire curriculum and the way things are taught, etc. So, it's very close to how Harvard, for example, still functions. In fact, when I was there, my dean used to be IIM Ahmedabad grad, of course, but he came for 3 years to IIM, for a few years to IIM, back to IIM, because from Harvard actually. So he was there at Harvard. He did his PhD, etc., and then came back for just to become the director of our institute for a few years.
Got it.
So IIM Ahmedabad and Harvard connection is actually quite substantial. But anyways, my point was that it's very different the way you're taught. You have case studies, you have different problems that are given to you as businesses, which you have to read up before in advance, and then you just discuss. There's no right or wrong answer, typically, but you discuss and try to get to a thing that largely all people agree with, and basically the professor, who's very, very experienced, who's done multiple, who's not just a PhD but he's also worked in industries at times, he or she helps guide that discussion, right, and guide the batch to sort of reach a conclusion. So it's very collaborative, and it is a very different sort of experience from IIT, the way you're taught in IIT, for example. So that was a very new experience for me. I again had a lot of friends, a lot of fun along the way, and in my second year I had a lot of finance and economics courses. That's actually the first time I came across PE, VC industries, right? So those were very new to me. I interned from IIM Ahmedabad in a place called Goldman Sachs in trading in Hong Kong, which was securities, day trading kind of a role, which was also a very new experience for me. It was great, a great experience, but I think a very stressful job from 9 to 3, and then it just becomes done. So you're just done. So it is, it has a lot of these highs and lows, which I sort of didn't enjoy particularly. So I changed sort of my focus towards getting into PE kind of a role. I didn't have any work experience, like I said, at IIM Ahmedabad. So I appeared in interviews for McKinsey, BCG, Bain, which are more open to sort of taking freshers directly from IIM. I got into McKinsey and BCG. I chose McKinsey, and that's IIM.
How old were you when you got into IIM Ahmedabad?
I was I think 22. Okay. I was 22.
Got it. So what would you advise people if they want to get into IIM Ahmedabad and all? Should they go without work experience? Should they go after having a couple of years of work experience? What's your advice?
Yeah, I think no, that's a great question. And I actually, when my brother is 2 years younger, and he also had the same question. I gave him the advice, and I was at IIM Ahmedabad at the time, and I saw that the things that we discuss, they could be a lot more. You can gain a lot more from them if you have worked in a place before. So if I had to, I mean, it's not like if I had to do it all over again, I would probably choose it the other way. But I still advise my brother to sort of just work and then go for an MBA. I do think that if you have a work experience, if you worked with people before, you know a lot of these things that you know the prof talks about, or the people around you talk about, and it's a lot more enriching for you. So that's, I think, I do think that people should have a couple of years before going into an MBA college.
Got it. Makes sense. And what are the fees at IIM Ahmedabad, and like how is that structure?
I think it's about, at my time, now it has increased a couple of times, but at my time it was, I think, 25 lakhs for 2 years.
Got it. And I think there would be scholarships and all.
Yeah. So I was actually a gold medalist at IIM Ahmedabad.
Okay.
But the way I actually thought about the money that got spent was, you have one internship. So if you can maximize what you earn there, plus of course what you want to experience, then you have a couple of scholarships along the way, which let's say, you know, people like conglomerates basically sponsor, because they want to, you know, advertise and you know, have that kind of a thing. So you can get a couple of lakhs there if you do well. There is Aditya Birla, there is used to be S-Bank, there used to be other sort of scholarships. And then I think eventually, I think the way you should, and therefore you can probably make up 1/3 of that cost, or you know, maybe 20% of that cost.
How much would a typical intern be getting per month if he is at IIM Ahmedabad, like in that 2 months period?
So yeah, so 2 months of internship. So I did my internship, like I said, in Hong Kong. So that was a little more top of the paying in that sense. So I made a little more than you know, some of the others did, but I think a marketing or a McKinsey BCG Bain would typically pay you for 2 months, I think about between, I think, 3 to 4 lakhs. Kind of.
Got it. Yeah, then I think the ROI is justified here, right? Like for example, if anyone wants to get in there, the return on investment is what people will calculate. So even on the first salary which they get, that has to be more than 25 lakhs. Otherwise,
yeah. I mean, I think the average salary is 20 lakhs. So you will make it up in a year.
Yeah.
Or if you want to take loan, that's also, I think, pretty cheap.
Right.
Education loan is quite available in the country. But yeah, you'll make it up in a year or year and a half max.
Got it. And talking about your campus placement experience at IIM Ahmedabad, so you got into McKinsey as well as BCG, and you chose McKinsey. How was that entire interview experience? How did you prepare for them?
No, I think that ways IIM, because of the, you know, the people that are there. There is a lot of, you know, there are people who've worked for 2 years, and so anyone who comes into an MBA college is actually quite motivated to do the stuff, and therefore you have all of these communities that get formed actually on day one to help you clear some of these interviews. For example, when I was preparing for my markets internship, which is the Goldman Sachs internship, I had a very good sort of group that I used to study with. I had seniors who had gone to the same internship, who used to tell me how to, you know, how to, or what kind of questions get asked, what kind of things that you want to look at. They want to look at while hiring, and therefore there's a very set, when you get into IIT or IIM, I think getting placed is very sort of, I would not say easy, but at least it's very structured. So if you follow the structure, you will get something. I think that's one thing that a CA doesn't. I think there is no sort of coordinated placement in a CA sort of role, which happens at IIT or IIM. So I think in markets you get you have to really learn about how markets work, options, you know, futures. So very sort of practical and theoretical. So theory is not like they will ask you Black-Scholes and what's the formula of Black-Scholes, etc. But you know, they'll talk about what is happening in the world, how is it affecting markets, and so on. So that is one area that I prepared at the time of internship. And then for McKinsey BCG Bain, it was a very sort of intensive case study prep that happens. At one time at IIM Ahmedabad, you can see just everywhere around you people asking cases from each other. So you give me a case, I will give you a case back. You know, and Some of these cases are actually live cases because let's say you get it from a senior who's done an internship, and in an internship we actually work on a live case, live problem, and therefore that is basically a case that you can ask someone else, right? That how you solved that particular problem that you were there at the internship. So they ask their juniors, the juniors ask their friends, and so on. So it's basically a very I think at one point everyone is just asking cases from each other. So that's the way I think it works. It's very collaborative in that sense. You also have these consult clubs where industry experts, etc., come in, talk about their experiences, sometimes give you cases. I think case study is a lot about practice, like everything else, right? Even in CA or IIT, it's clearing is just about practice, and how much you can do in what kind of time, right? So it's the same here. It's not any different.
What proportion of your batch would be placed in consulting versus private equity versus VC? What would that rough number be?
Yeah, I think it changes year on year. For my batch, it was a good year, but I think a couple of years after that, there was a slowdown, and then right during this COVID period, there was a lot of demand again.
Yeah.
So it is a bit cyclical in that sense, but I would expect across internships where they give PPOs plus the finals, you can expect about, from the 400 that I mentioned, about 60 people in MBB, and then there is AT Kearney, other consulting firms, very strategy and so on. I would say about 100-120 people get placed in consulting. Another, call it 15-20 in investment banking, and a major chunk in marketing and program management, general management.
Right.
So program management would be, for example, I think now because of these startups also trying to cut costs, etc. But there was one point when a lot of startups also used to go there for hiring great talent and so on.
Yeah.
Now it might be a little bit slower.
Right.
But so those are the 5-6 kind of jobs that are there.
Makes sense. Is there anything you feel you wanted to be taught at IIM Ahmedabad but that was not taught to you? Or you think something was missing, agar ye sikhaya hota to maza aa jata? Anything of that sort?
No, actually, it is more about your own time constraint, because agar main ye course karta to meko, so you have to select courses, which and sometimes these courses clash, so you have to miss out on a few courses and so on. I think they have all the courses possible back at IIM Ahmedabad, but I for example, I had not done one strategy course which is supposed to be extremely good, because I had another finance course which I just really wanted to do. So those kind of things happen, but it's not for it's just for lack of time and not for lack of choice.
Right.
You have a lot of choice.
The reason I asked this question to you is because there are a lot of new startups and new business schools coming which are trying to involve the business leaders from startups from these actual companies who are working there, and then they are asking these people to come and teach on the platform, which is not the case with brands like IIM Ahmedabad or any of the B school which is there, like traditional B school versus a B school which is calling industry practitioners on a part-time basis to come and teach. And I was also reading an article there are several new business schools which are coming up where they are just focusing on upskilling and not on any academic curriculum. So that was one of the reasons I asked you that, is there anything, for example, in the upskilling space, or for example in the proper simulation kind of a space where people want to understand how does it look like to work in this kind of an industry? This is something which I think is not taught at these B schools, but again, open to your views.
No, these days it is increasing. At my time, it was a lot less. But the way, for example, when there is a case that's being done, sometimes you get a person from that company. For example, if you're talking about some company, it happens more. Because we study more like Harvard cases, so it's American companies, Indian companies also. But you do have some people, so Americans can't turn up, in some of these lectures, but there are people who turn up in lectures to talk about their sort of view on what the company was going through at that time, which you're talking about the case. There are a few specific courses, but I think it's a lot less than what it should be. So for example, one of my industry sort of colleagues, industry friends, actually now teaches a course of private equity in IIM Ahmedabad.
Oh wow!
So I mean, it is opening up, but it's a lot less than what, like you're saying, some of these new age upskilling schools may
Correct.
be doing. But I do think there is a lot to the name of IIM Ahmedabad, IIM Bangalore, IIM Calcutta that people would still value.
Yeah.
So I think, I mean, this is just me as an investor talking. The way to do it is also to partner with some of these
Correct.
schools to, you know.
No, I agree.
Yeah.
I've been trying to do that for my startup, and I can completely resonate with you.
Yeah.
So tying up with some universities and trying to see what else can be taught or
Because
how
I think-
can that be
Because I
collaborated.
think at the end of the day, in your CV, you know, you have, if you have a name like I'm A, B, C,
Yeah.
and these days I think Lucknow is also, or 20 years later, Lucknow, Kozhikode, all of these schools would be like extremely high in value.
Yeah.
So it's always sort of great to have that name.
Correct. No, I think, and one more point, like one more insight is that these schools are also now trying to come up with their online courses. By the way,
Yes.
there are a lot of companies like, let's say, Editus, which has an online learning arm, Emeritus.
Yeah.
The founder, Ashwin Damania, right? Like now, what they have done is very brilliant, like tying up with Harvard, Columbia, Stanford, and telling them, and telling them that, okay, we are going to like just launch your courses online. And that's what these companies are also trying to do, where collaborating with these kind of universities and then doing a revenue share kind of a model. That is like you're growing together. And in fact, I was reading an article, IIM Ahmedabad, even like the revenue at which these companies are operating. Like for example, IIM Ahmedabad's revenue, I read in one Twitter thread, was rupees 202 crores. And out of 202 crores, 101 crores was from tuition fees. And the remaining one was from investments and all the other kind of activities which are there. So the point of mentioning this is again, like after a point of time, people are also trying to find out how they can increase their revenue sources, how they can scale. Because like they also need to like scale after a point in time.
Agree. I think they're launching a lot of these courses that you can do online, like standalone courses. Like for example, you get an IIM Ahmedabad name along with the same model as Editus, right?
Correct.
So that is also, I think, a great sort of way to upskill yourself.
Right.
Learn about, let's say, blockchain, cryptocurrency, and so on. An IIM Ahmedabad course and that.
Makes sense. Let's talk about your McKinsey work experience. You were there for how many years at McKinsey?
I was there actually much lesser than I wanted to be there.
Carlyle called you much before, is it?
I mean, I did want to get into investing in private equity, and therefore when this came along, I went there. But one of my senior partners, when I spoke with him about this, he said that, you're going a little bit earlier. Of course, you can come back anytime, but so that's, I think, McKinsey is a great place to work. And my experience, of course, great people, very, very sort of smart people there that you work with. You learn a lot. Day one of the job, you're actually put in front of a client, and you have to really hold your ground, even though you don't know a lot, right? But you have to, I think, so it helps you teach a lot of problem solving, a lot of first principle thinking, and how to sort of convince others. So that part is great at McKinsey or a BCG or Bain. Every firm has different cultures, but I think broadly at the end of the day, everyone sort of works the same way, teaches the same way, teaches you to be the same, sort of consultant, hold your ground, convince people, and come up with a sort of a solution to a problem. Right?
Yeah.
So it was great working. I worked there for 13 months.
I did 13 is a good amount of time, right?
13 months.
Yeah, 13 months. 1 year, 1 month is not a bad time, no?
Yeah, but I think I do think that maybe a year could have been a lot better in hindsight. But I don't think then I would have had the opportunity also, right? I would have to let go of private equity opportunity and so on. So at that time, I had a conversation with a lot of people who had moved from consulting to private equity. Although those industries are not comparable, and I know that now, but I always used to compare at that time, what it's like in consulting, what's like in private equity, and so on. But yeah, it was a great experience. I learned a lot about industries, how people work. Like that was my first sort of job experience. I had internships along the way, but that was my first job, so to speak, right? So it was very, very eye-opening for me in terms of how you speak, how you conduct yourself, how you talk to other people, how you convince other people, taking feedback, giving feedback. All that was a great sort of great. And McKinsey is one of the best places in consulting to work for. So
Can you talk about a case that you would have worked on and how did you solve that? How was that entire experience?
yeah. So I had, I think, 4 kinds of cases. I did 4 cases during that 13 months. And actually, 6 months was one client, one case out of that. So
6 months, one case, and then 5 months, 3 cases.
yeah,
Sorry, 7 months.
Yeah, 7 months. Small cases, but
Okay. Got it. Yeah, if you can talk about any one of them.
yeah, I think my actually first case was also very interesting. There was a large client who was starting up a business in India, and they didn't even have the CEO to run that business. It was a business that actually McKinsey had, as a strategy exercise before. They had suggested that they should enter in India, that this is a growing market and so on, you should enter. So the mandate was to actually build that business from scratch, and it was absolutely unstructured execution, right? First unstructured problem solving and execution. It was like you were running the company in some sense. We hired the entire management team after sort of we had strategized, we had laid out the implementation plan, and actually finally started also. We executed the started the company.
So you're as good as a startup founder there.
Yeah, actually, yeah, you're right. I mean, we had a 5-member team. I was the acting, I think, I was looking at the entire tech stack that the company should build. So there was, of course, a couple of other people who were, CEO kind of. So my EM, for example, he was acting CEO, right?
EM is what? Sorry.
Engagement manager. So it's like the basically managerial layer. So
Right.
in
So
at
what would be
McKinsey,
the
for
hierarchy?
example, there is an associate, junior associate, engagement manager, associate partner,
Okay.
and then senior partner also. But so at McKinsey, I think you have, when you're junior associate and associate, you work with an EM over you. So that EM was basically acting like a CEO.
Yeah.
There was an AP also above, but APs are typically divided across 2-3 cases. EM is generally dedicated to one particular case. So that EM was basically day to day. If I had to go ask something that I need to do this, he was the one giving me the approval, so to speak, right? So it was, I think, as a team, it was a great experience for me because I joined day 1 and I was acting CTO in some sense.
Yeah.
Of course, again, my computer science background helped.
Yeah.
But it's not like someone else could not have done it. I think it's at McKinsey you get that structure. You have so many resources at your hand that you can learn on the job and so on. So I think that's one case that is extremely non-consulting like because you were your own client in some sense, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So how did that case end? Like, what was the outcome?
So we started the business. We hired the management team. We handed it over to them.
Okay.
We also had, I think, my work stream ended after 6 months, like I said. So I did a couple of other things apart from the tech stack.
Yeah.
I did the MIS and how do you monitor and so on. All of those things I did, and then when the tech team was hired, when the HR team was hired, when the CEO was hired, I think then McKinsey also gradually stepped out.
Got it.
And then the company sort of took over by themselves.
Got it.
So, but it was great. Absolutely, I think I would say, I don't think people, I was very lucky to get that kind of a case, first up. It was very, very different experience. Then I got a very sort of typical consulting case of cost optimization, right?
Okay.
So you have to come up with an idea and then it's project management that you have to basically make sure that the client does what is right for the company and what you've thought of, right? To be able to optimize costs. So that was the second. The third was a strategy piece, which was also very consulting-ish. You have to come up with, and it was very impactful. And then I had a very small sort of another case. But yeah, it was a great experience at McKinsey.
Yeah. And if let's say you're given a case and if you're not able to solve that, is there like, how does that happen? Or every case which you solve has to have a solution? How does that happen?
I think, I mean, it's not like there's one right solution, right, for anything, any problem. It's like, you know, in a business, right? If you're running a business, it's not like you have a right solution, right? You always have different constraints, and you have to optimize within those constraints, right? So it's always, I think, how can I simplify the problem? How can I solve it from a sort of first principle lens? That this is the way it should be. These are the things, and then you observe how the company functions, etc. Different cases have different sort of success rates, or the different solutions that you propose will have different success rates. But I think that's why you have, it's not like you are the only person that on that case, right? So you have your EM, you have partner, senior partner who have done some of those cases or similar cases before. So they can guide you in the right direction and so on. So it is, and then at McKinsey, like I said, and same for BCG, Bain, AT Kearney, some of these larger outfits, you have so many people who've been through that. You know, any problem that you work, somebody would have done it before. I think that's the basic sort of premise that you work on. So you talk to the person who would have done it before, how they went about it, you problem solve with them. So problem solve is a very McKinsey sort of term where you discuss basically, you know, they call it problem solving, but it's basically a discussion, your own ideas, their ideas, and you come up with something that can work. And then you pitch it to the clients will also have some ideas, and then you sort of come together and say that, okay, this is the plan that I'll work on. Right, as a client.
How big would be one team if they are given one case?
I think it really depends on the kind of problem. Like for example, I know very large cases at McKinsey that used to be like, you know, 20 people at a time. You know, 2-3 engagement managers, and below them again associates and junior associates. But I would say typically 2 junior associates, at least for example the first case that I talked about, the 5 people were 2 junior associates, 1 associate, 1 EM, 1 AP, and then partner, senior partner.
Got it, makes sense. And then you transitioned into Carlyle, like after 13 months of your experience at McKinsey.
So a headhunter reached out, and I had until that time actually my brother had started working in Blackstone. So I knew of Carlyle and so on, and how, you know, it was just a good sort of ref check that I did. Because I like I said, I wanted to get into investing finance. Although, I mean, McKinsey experience was also great, but within those cases also I would look at a little bit more in a finance sort of a way. So for example, if I'm, you know, if I'm suggesting, for example, in my strategy case, I actually asked a company to sell a part of an asset, and how do I value that asset, and how should they think about you know, selling that asset and so on. So when this opportunity came along, I thought that it was the right sort of move for me, and it's been 4.5 years. I think I also had the sort of comfort which some of my colleagues and senior partners at McKinsey had given, that you can come back if you want. And you know, so that always helps make that decision, right? That if that doesn't work out in 1 year, you can always come back. So of course I'll lose 1 year in that process, but 1 year and 70 years is not that.
Makes sense. And if you can help us with your interview at Carlyle, like how was it? Maybe broadly, if you can just give a gist to the audience, how can they prepare if they have an interview at a fund like a Carlyle or any other fund? How can they prepare, and what kind of questions are asked in these rounds? Because one of my friends, he got into Blackstone, there were 10 rounds of interview. Usually like there are 10 to 11 rounds of interview that happen, and I was shocked that this round, half an hour to 1 hour can be one round. So it's almost like 5 to 10 hours of proper interview process which happens before you are selected. So how was that for you? Was it very stressful? Was it very easy? How was that entire experience?
It was not that many for me.
Okay.
It was not that.
I think you're smarter than others.
No, it's not like that. I think it's just Carlyle interviews was I think 5, 6 people, 7 people actually interviewed. They do want to. Now I'm on the other side as well. I take interviews. The way when I talk to people who want to interview and you know, who ask for sort of advice, I think the way people think about it is, one area that they want to test is especially at junior levels, is the smarts and the IQ, first principle problem solving. So the way you would do it is they would give you a case, they would give you a live example, a live deal, or a live sort of company, and then tell you to think about 5 things that are right with the company, 5 things that are wrong, or some other case, a problem that the company is facing, and just try to get a sense of how you think about, in first principle terms. You're not supposed to have all the industry knowledge with you, but you're like, it's like a typical consulting interview as well. So I think that's one. And then I think from smarts also comes with itself, it talks about people ask puzzles, people ask mathematical problems and so on. And the reason why they ask is on the job. Sometimes the negotiations, etc., ask or demand of you like very quick thinking that, if you increase this by 50 crores, what is the impact and so on, right? So all of that, they just want to test that. So that's one part of testing that happened for me, and it happens for whoever I'm interviewing, whoever is being interviewed by the people today. Then there is a second I would say is they want to test you on your attitude, because I think this is private equity, in my view, is short of entrepreneurship or sort of starting up on your own. I think this is one where you actually require a lot of ownership, right? And therefore people will, it happens in different levels. So the partner will have sort of the most owner mindset, and then it percolates down, and a person who's just entering, what they want to see is that they have the right attitude to approach a problem or approach some work that's being given to them. And that attitude has 2 aspects. One is, of course, how you're with people, how you behave, etc., but also how you perform under pressure. So typically, I think one of the rounds that happens is a stress interview where they will just question you on, and it happens across PE firms, across even MBB, McKinsey, BCG, and I think some of these interviews are stress interviews where they just keep questioning you, oh, why, until they can get you to either say, oh, sorry, I was wrong, or you hold your ground, and so on, right? So different ways of doing a stress interview. But I think attitude is the second big bucket that people want to see. The third bucket I would say is I think ownership, right? And the way it works is that in private equity you really have to have an owner's mindset while doing a deal, because it's your, it's the capital of someone else, right? It's a very sort of high responsibility job that you have to be able to preserve capital, to be able to make returns and so on. And therefore, I think what people look for is right from the start, you have sort of this owner's mindset, or this responsibility that you have, that this is my sort of money, right? And or what can I do? So, like for example, if you have your own startup, and you have your own things that you do, you're always like 24/7 you're thinking about how you improve, what you do next, and so on and so forth, right? So I think that's what people expect. Of course, it comes with time. But that's I think one thing that people want to also test, that you have that kind of, and the way they test is whatever you've done previously, whatever you've done in the past, or the way you've been brought up, right? Is there anything that you can showcase that, and if you, for example, keep thinking about something, you typically know all aspects of it, or 90% of aspects of that problem if you think about it, So so the way to test that, at least when I do, and when it was done with me, is when I say I've done this case at McKinsey, for example, or when I say that at IIT Kanpur, it could be like this project that I did, they will like really go into detail of what you did, how you did, why you did it in a certain way, and so on. And that basically shows that you've thought through this, and therefore you have sort of a responsibility and ownership in that sense. So those are the 3 buckets, I would say, for a junior most person that would be entering a private equity fund. And then, of course, if you're entering it at slightly sort of maybe 1-2 years of work experience, and they want you to hit the ground running, then they will also take a model test, modeling test, basically.
So can you give us few examples of the questions which you ask candidates, what kind of answers you feel a good candidate is giving, what kind of answers a bad candidate is giving? If you can just help with some examples, that will really help the audience understand, okay, like this is the way I should answer, this is the way I should not answer.
No, I think I'll just take it across the three parts, right? So I think case interviews is uh, very straightforward. You have to just make sure, first of all, take some time to think about what the case is. For example, if I say that, let's take a spectacles shop, for example, right? Now I want to understand if I want to open another shop, right? So just take some time to think on how you'll structure the problem. I think structuring is probably the most important on, that gives the first indication that in your mind the person is able to think of everything, and when you're structured you don't miss out on something. So I think the first thing that you should do is just structure the problem. So I would say, for example, okay, I'll look at how much revenue can you generate, what kind of margins will you make, what kind of costs you will have, what kind of margins you'll make, what is the investment that you'll require, and therefore I will then look at payback period or ROI or whatever, what have you, right? So that's one way to structure this. And then within that, I think then it has to be a little bit interactive. You always need to ensure that you're speaking to the person you're interviewing with. And then it sort of, so the person will sort of ask you to go into detail into one topic or whatever he or she wants to test, right? So that's, I think, so structure the problem, keep the communication channel open, and then take some cues. So for example, if you're asking me something again and again, asking for some data or some pointers, if I'm not giving it, that means that that's not the right direction to go.
Correct.
Right? And so just take the cues. So I think those three, and this comes with practice. Like I said, at IIM Ahmedabad, for example, there's a point when everybody is just doing cases. I think that's the way to do this. Then there is, I think, the kind of questions that get asked at puzzles. There are a lot of puzzles on Google that, mind teasers kind of stuff, which I think are more to understand more to test your IQ, and then and sometimes calculations. I think that's the second problem. So the third thing I would ask is, if I'm interviewing a CA or someone who's had some sort of experience in economics, finance, and I would also ask P&L balance sheet kind of questions that, if it's a CA, then I would ask, for example, I would expect them to know how deferred tax asset, deferred tax liabilities work, how would they affect should I take them in my ROIC calculations, and just basic stuff on how you think about, and again, there are two companies, how do I figure out which the right company, what are the financial metrics that you look at, why, right? So again, not very theoretical finance and theoretical sort of P&L balance sheet, but in practice what we see every day, those kind of
makes sense,
those kind of things. Model test I talked about. Take a company, build a model, and then within that model you can have a lot of structures that you can test people again.
What kind of structures?
Like I said, different kinds of exit scenarios, different entries, tranched entries. So you enter today, you enter 3 years out, you exit in multiple tranches, you exit at one go, the kind of leverage you take, you load up the opco, which is the company itself, or you load up your own investment vehicle. So a lot of different permutations, combinations that can be done with a model test. And I think finally I would say, stress interview or like a ownership is just about your own experience and holding a ground that you know what you've done, and therefore whatever gets asked you can talk about that. So whatever is written in your CV, whatever you talk about, I think you have to make sure that you know everything about that problem. And by everything it's not 100%, but 90%, and you're able to convince sort of the other person that you've thought about 90% of this.
Yeah. Do you also ask questions like estimate the number of balls that will fit in Boeing 747?
That goes in the puzzles category. I don't ask that, but there are people who ask that as well. I think, estimate the number of wheels in India, those kind of things.
Yeah, I think estimate the number of Ubers in Mumbai, number of taxis.
So again, McKinsey, BCG, Bain interviews, these are very standard questions to get asked of. And there are there are other sort of resources that are there that have some of these guesstimates, they're called, kind of things that. And in fact, the way in a VC interview, for example, you will get asked. There is a company, he was just saying it, eruditus, right? Let's say, what is the target market of that? So again, it's a very unstructured guesstimate that you have to do. You have to structure it first. You have to say, okay, these are the target areas. Then in this, what is the segment and how many people, and then paying capacity and so on and so forth. Right. So that's the way. Again, the thing that they're trying to test is not the right answer, but just how you structure it, and then finally, of course, it's not like you can say, okay, number of Ubers running in Mumbai is like 100, right? So you have to be right in the zip code. 100 is wrong, the wrong answer for sure. So there are wrong answers. There are no right answers, but there are wrong answers for sure.
Yeah, makes sense. No, I remember so by the way, I was giving my interview at BCG, although I couldn't get in, but my buddy used to ask me these kind of questions. Like one very random question was that estimate the number of poha particles in a plate. So basically, kitne poha ke wo particles hoge in one plate. Of course, there's no right or wrong answer, but they're trying to see ki kaise structure karenge. Like you have to divide the volume of the entire plate by the volume of the poha particle. Just take some assumptions and all. So that is something which really helps you in order to think very properly in a structured manner, and helps you in order to identify or approach a problem with a very good mindset. I think that is something which consulting teaches for sure. Talk about more of your Carlyle experience, if you can share one experience of any particular deal. How was that entire experience from scouting to investment to transferring the amount and to closing the documents to portfolio management? How does that work?
Yeah, so I think one I mean, I wouldn't talk about specific deals.
Sure,
but
of course.
I think the way a typical deal sort of lifeline works is sourcing, right? So in sourcing 2-3 different kinds of deals. So there is a prop deal, which is a proprietary deal where a founder or of a company. Very sort of rare for that to happen, because now I think it's a very large industry, but it used to happen a lot more earlier, where you're in sort of bilateral conversations with someone, right? So that's one kind of a deal. Then there are deals that are brought by investment bankers to you, because they have been mandated to find a buyer for that. So prop deals and process kind of two sourcing mechanisms. I think the way, at least in any private equity, you contribute is also you just, because of your network, if you can get to hear about, okay, what are the other people spending time on, what are the bankers working on, and therefore you try to preempt it sometimes and try to convert processes into props. But I think those are the two sort of auctions or processes and proprietary sourcing kind of deal. Then I think you have an initial sort of analysis, a basic model. Internally, you get a diligence approval. You do a diligence which basically involves a very detailed financial, legal, commercial, and other areas. For example, ESG. How are their governance practices and so on and so forth. So all of these things you try to assess, because you're going to own that company. And again, like I said, it's a very owner's mindset, particularly so, for example, at a global firm like, Carlyle, for example. So that's what you try to assess. It's a very sort of rigorous diligence that you do. You have to know about everything about the company, about the industry, about their financials and so on. The way the team gets divided within this is you'll have a senior associate or a VP working across the domain, across the entire deal, and then there'll be analysts, associates who will be running across particular pieces. Someone will just be doing the model and the financials, someone will be doing the commercial, someone will be doing the legal and so on. Typically, I think it's 1 or 2 people below the senior associate or the VP.
Yeah.
And then you have, of course, the director and the MD and partner. So that's how the deal and the diligence gets structured. Then finally, I think depending on the kind of firm, there are 2 processes, or there are 1 or 2 processes, which is to go to your internal committee investment committees they're called, make the case for the investment, and at that time they ask you a lot of questions and you have to be prepared. I think that's one process that it's like, you know, it's like you're being tested, right? So you have to prepare for it like a test,
Yeah.
right? And it's so that the preparation is after diligence or during diligence. There's a preparation phase. Then you go to an IC, you get approved, and then there's negotiations. If it's an auction, then you also try to play the dynamics a bit, which is the whole negotiations part of it, which I'm just getting sort of exposed to. And how you handle with other people, how you handle yourself, your relationship, your negotiations with the counterparty, the promoter you're investing in, or the promoter you're buying from, and also your competitors, right? So that's the final part of it. So that's on the deal and then you make the investment, right? There are a lot of structuring legal elements that go into it, which are, I think, very industry specific, I mean private equity specific, and VC specific, that you have to know. But legal documents, for example, share purchase agreement, shareholder agreement, all of those things. I'm not a lawyer, but I still have, I think I would say, read so many legal documents that I know a fair bit about how they're drafted and so on. And then finally, I think once you have done the deal, then it becomes portfolio, and that is a very long control mindset oriented, owner mindset oriented engagement with your management team to run that company, right? And within that, multiple so you'll have interventions that you would have thought about while during diligence, that this is something that you need to do more, you need to do better, or you need to improve on. And then these are the new areas that you want to enter, and then that goes on. Between year 3 to year 5, you also will then look for an exit option, depending on how the company is doing. If the company is doing well, then you'll try to exit a little bit early, bump up the IRR, which is the rate of return, right? So a 3-year hold will have a higher IRR than a 5-year hold, assuming the same value, right? So there will be value differences, but you try to optimize IRRs. And so once the deal is done, year 1 to 3 is trying to build that company, year 3 to 5 is exit, and that's the entire deal lifeline.
Who are typically the members of investment committee?
Very senior people, like so there are 2 investment committees sometimes. So there is an Asia investment committee in some firms, then there is a US investment committee in some firms. So typically Asia heads, CEOs of the company, of Carlyle, for example, or of Blackstone, the CIOs of these places. So it's like very, and the partners, founders. So Steve Schwarzman, for example, for Blackstone, or David Rubenstein, Bill Conway for Carlyle, and so on. So I mean, it depends on internal sort of how they look at it, but like these are very experienced people, and they will know more about any business that you pick than yourself, for sure. And therefore, the kind of questions that ask, you need to be able to answer. Right, and
that must be more stressful than an interview, I'm sure.
No, it is an interview, right?
Actually, it is an interview.
It is an interview for the entire deal team. For sure.
Makes sense. How many vacancies would be there in 1 year in this kind of a field of private equity, including global, domestic funds?
A lot depends on also the macro, actually. So, for example, right now the macro is tough, and there's inflation, interest rates are rising, and so on and so forth, and therefore the expectation on you deploying the capital is just a little bit higher. And at these times, I think people will try to be conservative in hiring. But I think typically at a junior level, for people like Blackstone, for example, who have very structured pre-MBA programs, and now Carlyle also has, I think there you'll have 1 or 2 openings, I would say, every year.
Got it.
And then at a post-MBA level, it really depends, like I said, on the cycle you're in for investing.
Right, makes sense. What would your learning resources be in terms of knowing about news, like newsletters or podcasts, if you listen to or if you read any?
I think the newspaper, so FT, ET, The Economist, and so on. So the job is, like I said, owner's mindset. So you have to make sure that whatever you're doing, you're 100% into it and you're thinking about it. And therefore, sometimes you don't get time to read it so much thoroughly, some of these resources, but then you try to catch up, right? And so that's one. Then the resources for us are basically experts. So we have our own set of, every firm have their own operating advisors which they can talk to. There are all of these expert agencies that you can use to sort of speak to experts temporarily and so on. So that gives you industry knowledge. And then I think finally, I think once you're into diligence, then you have a lot of advisors that also help you.
And like I think this was super helpful. One last question from my side would be, if anyone who's watching this is just, let's say, 18 to 23, 22 kind of an audience, which I have, and they want to get into a fund like a Carlyle, what would be your piece of advice for all of them? What can they do right from 17, 18 years of age itself, so that they can also get into companies like Blackstone, Carlyle, TPG, and all of these sort?
Got it. I think, yeah, that's a good question. My first advice is, at that time that you're doing, you just start whatever you're doing, right? You have to have that mindset, right? That you want to be able to do the best in that. So for example, if it's at 17, 18, maybe you're preparing for CA or you're preparing for IIT, you just want to maximize that, right? And try to sort of give yourself a good base. So for example, you get a rank in a CA, you get a good rank in IIT, go to a good IIT and so on. So that's, I think, the first foundation part of it. The second thing that you also need to start doing is thinking about businesses, right? And typically at that age, nobody really thinks about, dhanda kaise chalta hai, or how do businesses run. I think that's one thing, because that will always help you if you're interviewing for either consulting or a private equity. It will, and these are very different industries, not comparable, but still, I think how you think about businesses, how you structure problems, I think that's something that you will develop over time. And therefore, you, like, for example, just think about Uber, right? How does Uber function, right? For example, it's like the common things that you see around you. How would they function? How are they making money? How are they? What are their costs? What are their strengths, weaknesses, opportunities? So just start thinking about that a little bit whenever you get time, and read up on economics and the world, because I think that's, like you said, the airport test. The things that you talk about generally is politics, world, economics, right? So get attuned to that. Start listening, start reading, and develop your own sort of mindset. And then finally, I think if you're pursuing CFA or a CA, to be able to get some exposure into finance, private equity, modeling, a lot of resources that I mentioned earlier, across case studies, puzzles, and models exist in Google. So try to do that if this is the career that you want to.
Your dad has a business, right?
Yes.
So you never thought of joining your dad's business, because you also come from a Marwari family.
Yeah.
अपने इसमें धंधा थोड़ा रहता ही है. Although you are evaluating businesses.
That is true. I think. Yeah.
Are you evaluating your dad's business?
I do. But I think, like I think I previously mentioned that short of entrepreneurship, I think private equity is the industry that you get really close to that.
Yeah.
And therefore, I don't. Of course, when I start up, if I start up, that will be a good sort of challenge, a new challenge. But at least this would have prepared me well to do that. So that's how I think about it. I don't know what the future holds for me, but right now I'm happy. It's a great place to work, and it's a great industry to be in.
Nice. Yeah, I think I can see your happiness on your face as well. Very excited for private equity and all. But thank you so much, Samyak. This was super insightful. Thanks for all the frank answers.
Thank you.
I hope I could do justice to your time by asking the relevant set of questions.
No, thanks. Thanks for having me, and thanks for doing a great sort of interview, great conversation, and I hope it was helpful to the people who are listening.
Definitely. I'm sure like a lot of people are going to learn a lot about the entire private equity industry and like the way it is being functioned and how do you prepare. And I think we've discussed a bunch of things I can't even remember right now. So thanks to you, and yeah, wish you all the best for your future endeavors.
Sure. Thanks, and good luck to everyone who's listening.
Perfect. Thanks.